remains to be seen. So I've been the Enoch Perley fellow that I mentioned a couple of times. I've been actually researching him since I was probably 10. I wrote my first paper about him when I was in high school. And I don't know why he's so interesting to me. He was a very enterprising kind of guy. He was the kind of person who was like, well, we need leather, so I guess I better learn how to tan leather. Okay. And he would just learn whatever he needed to know. And so he's a fascinating guy, but his family came from Boxford, Massachusetts, and they were an offshoot of the folks who came and settled Massachusetts Bay Colony. So they came and settled, came over in a bunch of ships at one point, and then they sort of spread out. And the folks from that area ended up founding the town of Bridgeton and a lot of the other towns around here. One of the founders of Bridgeton also came to Ellsworth and was one of the founders of Ellsworth. So it's amazing the connections. So my family came from New Jersey, and there was no connection there as far as I knew. And then one year for Christmas, I was doing a project for my brothers and sisters where I was pulling together all of the ancestors for all of our family lines. And I had one that I just couldn't figure it out. I kept hitting the same brick wall over and over again. And it was Christmas Eve, and I said, I'm just going to try one more time. And I ended up finding that one little missing piece of information that tied it all together. So my family came from western New Jersey. Before that, they were in eastern New Jersey, and they came to eastern New Jersey from the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And I said, well, isn't that interesting? And I have this big Perley family genealogy book. It's a massive, massive tome. And I said, I wonder if there's any Dennises, my family, in the book. So I went to the index and I looked it up and like, okay, there's 3 Dennis family members. I don't know who they are. 2 of them actually strangely had connections to Bridgeton. Okay, that's weird. The third one was a man named William Dennis, and he was, in the book, he was listed as a witness to somebody's will. And I'm reading, it's like the second page of an entry, and I'm reading, and I'm like, boy, this sounds really familiar to me. And I flipped it back over, and it was Enoch Perley's father. So why was William Dennis serving as a witness on Enoch Perley's will? Is he a family member? Is he a friend? Is he a neighbor? To this day, I still don't know, but I'm like, one of these days I'm going to find out that Enoch Perley is my cousin. I just know it. I can feel it. I haven't found the connection yet. But it's interesting to me the number of people that have reached out to me from Ancestry saying, I've got this family connection. And I say, well, I don't have a family connection, but I'm just somebody who randomly tracks other people's ancestors. I don't know, it's a thing. So that's one way, and then every time I have a conversation with somebody, I find out, particularly in Bridgeton, I find out that, that we have this Bridgeton thing where people are like, I didn't have any connection to Bridgeton, and then I came to live here, and I found out that I'm actually descended from this person or that person. I'm like, yeah. So there's something weird that's kind of like otherworldly. I think that you have a connection to whatever place you're from, even if you don't know that you're from there. It's a theory I'm working on. I'll let you know. So anyway, it's a fascinating thing to me, and I love those. I love being able to take the foundation of history and facts and kind of build on that. So it's that play of facts and details and what would a person feel like if they were in that situation. With this most recent one that I finished, the old squire, there's a family that loses several of their young women family members to consumption, tuberculosis. And there's 4 daughters and 3 of them die of tuberculosis, and 1 of them does not. Wow, what's it like to be her? To be wondering, you know, first of all, to be losing your sisters one after another. And I mean, they died within, 3 of them within 15 months, 2 of them within 3 months of each other. Just absolutely horrible, horrible. And I thought, you know, what is it like to be that daughter that doesn't die? You know, like, is she just waiting? And somebody said that, one of her friends in a letter said that, you know, she seems like a forlorn lamb, and she says that she does not hold much hope for the future. You know, so dying, watching her sisters die and wondering if she's next, I'm like, ah.
Survivor guilt.
Survivor guilt, yeah. Yeah. So horrible. She actually grew up, she married a preacher and lived a good long life. Nobody else in her family did, but we got one. So anyway, so it's fascinating to me, and it's I guess for me probably it's being able to sort of work through that whole process, like what would a person do, you know, with Dominique, what would she do having survived that, you know, how would she deal with that, what would she do next? Is she as wise as she seems to be, or is she only wise in certain ways and she's foolish in other ways? I don't know. It's just fascinating to me, the psychology behind it, and trying to be true to the people as they're presenting themselves to me. Like, would that person really do that? Is that out of character? And if it is, why? Why did she react that way? It's always fascinating. It's fun. So it's kind of a safe way to play with fire, I guess. You know, you can kind of go, oh, what would happen if this person, what would happen if there was an escaped ornamental named Tiffany or something like that? Well, uh-oh. So what about all of you? Are any of you writers?
Sort of.
Yeah, well, no, you either are or you're not.
I know.
Okay, so you are. You're a writer, okay.
I just journal.
I dabble.
See? Yeah.
Short stories, but I never finish them to get to the big one. Do you have difficulty reading another book? You must come up with ideas that you're reading somebody else's writing, I mean.
Oh, you
Like I
wonder-
said, it's the curiosity. I do the same thing in a sense. I'll read something on the line. Did they do that? Whatever.
Sometimes, a lot of times what I have is, like I'm reading a book right now called Prairie Fires, and it's about Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Oh.
You probably have that here in the library. It's fantastic. It's a biography. Absolutely fantastic. The woman takes the story and puts it in the context of history, and she builds the whole story around it. And instead of it being like, oh, you know, so they moved again, she's like, well, why did they move? It was the panic of 1893, and all this stuff was going on. And it was prairie fires, and it was, you know, terrible epidemics and all this stuff. So it's fantastic. So when I'm reading something like that, I'm like, man, I wish I'd written this. This is so good. And then a lot of times when I'm reading somebody who's like a really, really good writer, I think, man, I wish I could write like that. And then I think, I want to write like myself. But like I will really enjoy somebody's writing and think, man, they really can turn a phrase. Ooh, look what they did with that. But then I don't want to get caught up in like analyzing what I'm reading, because I really like to read. I like to just sit down with a book, put my feet up, cup of tea, just enjoy. And there, okay, there's a little moment of complete non-humility. I've read a few books since I wrote this one, and I'm like, yeah, that was okay, but it's no guest book. I know, it's a little obnoxious, but sometimes I'm like, really? That's a bestseller? You're kidding me. Ah!
A lot of them out there.
But, you know, that's fantastic. I love it when people have bestsellers, because it means that there are people reading. So that's great. I love that. And then sometimes I'll meet a character that I think, I don't really like that character. I wish I'd done something like that. But it's usually, I'm happy doing what I do and seeing what I'm gonna do next, because I'm always surprised. Yeah, who knows? So you write short stories that never end. What do you think that means? What if there was a woman that wrote short stories, but she never finished them? What do you think that means?
Well, I mean, there's so much out there now. There's so much good and bad.
Yeah.
And it's almost like anybody can publish. And
Yeah, and that's the good news and the bad
some of the
news.
stuff I thought, oh, that's something to look into, and then I could have a go. And then I read what they had written, and I thought, let's close that out. So,
Yeah, publishing now it's completely different than it was before. I have a young friend who's 21, I think, and he's going to be publishing his first history book. He's taken he's from Bridgeton also. He's taken an old surveying diary that we have, Solomon Wood. And he's written all of his notes in it about, so many chain lengths and all the chain lengths and all that kind of stuff. So what my friend has done is he's taken that surveyor's notebook and he's fleshing it out. So he's talking about what it really means, and he's talking about this, what it really meant that he was doing, and he's added a lot of history and information to it. So it's basically a public domain work, and he's building on top of it. And so he will have his own, he'll be publishing his very first book at the age of 21, and I'm so excited for him. But it's a completely different thing than it was just really not very long ago, where you would write a book and you'd send it off to a publisher, and the publisher would send you a rejection letter, and then you'd send it to another one and you get another, so you'd have like a whole collection of rejection letters. You don't have to have those now. That to me is, I think, has been very freeing for a lot of writers. Now, the downside of that is that people are self-publishing, and some of it's complete trash. I mean, it's just like, really, do you have a complete sentence in the whole thing?
right.
But then there's also, it's fantastic because so many more people can tell their stories. And I talk to school kids sometimes, and I talk about how, you can have your own book published. You can tell your own story. And I think that's really powerful, and I think it's freeing. But it doesn't mean that people are going to want to read it. I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to make $1 million. I'm like, good luck with that. Because at this point, the major publishing houses are publishing people that have already had bestsellers. So Stephen King is not going to have any problems getting published. But, the next Stephen King, who nobody knows he exists, is going to have a hard time finding a publisher, which is one of the great things with self-publishing, because you can publish it and then it's a book, it's a real thing, and it's much easier to get attention for it than it is that, you got a manuscript somewhere tucked away that nobody will ever read. So anyway, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see things change, and they're still changing in the publishing world. Amazon just did a merger between CreateSpace, which is where I was publishing my books, and KDP, which is their Kindle branch. They've actually just combined them, and they're in the process of making them into one thing. So before, you would publish on CreateSpace, and then you would take your files to Kindle and you would publish on Kindle. And now they'll be published both through the same process, and I don't know how that's going to look yet.
How expensive is that?
It's
Publishing,
not.
self-publishing.
It's not. It's zero expensive. Yeah. I published through a couple of different organizations previously, and once I started working with CreateSpace, I was like, wow. So before I had to pay, and now I don't. Oh, okay. So CreateSpace has been a great platform to work through. So you publish it, you upload your interior files, you upload your cover file, and then within, once it's approved, they check it to make sure your files are not clunky. Once it's approved and you've signed off on the proof, I mean, within sometimes as little as an hour, it shows up on Amazon's website. It's that quick.
So the marketing, you have to do your own marketing.
The marketing is the big job. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have a publisher that's going to work for you to put together a book tour or whatever. So you have to marry one. Hi. No, and that's the hard part. It's getting the word out, and it's having that. Especially if you're somebody like me who has a job, it's very difficult to spend all your time marketing your books. But that's what it comes down to. It's the marketing of it.
Where is the editing coming in?
I have all of my books edited because I've read my writing. It's not really that good.
No, but I know, was it
So I do hire an editor.
the last speaker, was it a woman about hiking that said Anne Rice, was she the one that said? Anne Rice doesn't have another editor to go. She figures she has enough books out now, of course. So.
They don't have to be
Yeah.
edited anymore. I know that I constantly put you when it should be your, for example. And I've noticed a lot with professionally published books from big publishers that the copywriting isn't what it used to be. I always find errors, and I'm like, oh. And it really jumps out to me. Not when I'm reading my own stuff. That I can just skim right over, like, I told him, I don't know. I was reading one the other day where it was talking about, I just finished it a couple days ago. It was talking about a character, and she was talking about herself, and she called herself the wrong name. So that's a little awkward. So the editing part of it it's so important, and when you see somebody that has not had an editor look at their stuff, you can always tell. You can always tell. And even then, even sometimes my editor misses stuff, and I catch it when I'm going back through again. But it's, of course, a couple of the books I've sent her have been a little scary. She's like, oh man, don't ever do that to me again. I'm like, sorry. Because some of my books have old letters, and they're written in such a way, I try to lightly edit them to make them a little more readable, but I don't like to mess with them too much. So I had one book where there were letters from several different people, and they all had kind of an old 19th century flavor to them. So she was editing 4 or 5 different people in the course of one book, and I was like, that was a little rugged, but it came out good. It's fun. It's all good. But that editing piece is really, really important. I happen to have an editor in the family, so that works out well for me. And she's been great about working with my run-on sentences. She expects them, and she just knows how to fix them, But I think that's really helpful, because I used to actually be an editor, so I'm familiar with what a run-on sentence is and what to do about it. But I like to just write, and then we just clean up the details later. And then I lost my train of thought. I have no idea. We'll have to rewind later, and I'll remember what I was talking about. But something about editing, and it's important, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But anyway, it's good to have a good one. And if you don't have one, you should find one. And I always like to tell the story about people needing editors. People kind of depend on spell check and autocorrect and things like that to kind of tell them that they've made a mistake. But there, and there, it doesn't work. It doesn't pick up on things like that. But I was reading a bunch of student papers, because I used to also be a college professor, it's another lifetime ago. And I was reading a paper that she had written, and it was about a bank fraud case that she'd been involved with. And so she's writing in the paper, sitting there at the table, reading, and she says she meant to say a gentleman an older gentleman walked up to me, and she said, an older genital man walked up to me. And I fell off my chair, literally. I fell off my chair. And I laughed so hard, and when I gave the paper back to her, she looked at it and she was so embarrassed, and she said, this is going to be one of those stories that you tell over and over again, isn't it? I said, yes it is, yes it is. And she was right.
Does your computer sometimes put words in like my phone does? They think they know what I'm thinking?
Sure, we can blame it on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, my computer doesn't finish the words, but
Okay.
it doesn't pick up on when I do you instead of your, so it doesn't pick up on those things. And even, you know, I try to be really careful when I go through it, and I try to be really, really conscious of what I'm reading. But if you know that you typed it right, then your brain is just convinced that it's right, so it just keeps moving. So what I've tried to do is like stop and read each word separately, or even read it out loud, and I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible, let's fix it. But you know, when you're writing a 70 or 80,000 word book, it's hard to read the whole thing out loud. It takes a really long time. One of the things I've tried to do is to talk the book, like use dictation software, and it's a completely different thing for me, completely different, because talking and writing are not the same for me. There's something with either handwriting. Some of these books I've actually handwritten because they would have been like the diary book. When I was writing additional entries for her diary to explain things that happened that she didn't talk about, I hand wrote them because she hand wrote what she did. But for me, it's handwriting it or typing it are different from speaking it. So even though I tried the talking thing, and then something happened, and then something else happened, and something then happened. It just doesn't. It's not the same for me. It's just not the same. I don't like it. So probably not going to do that. Dragon software. Plus, it'll do strange words.
Yes.
You'll say, I don't know. I don't even know what, but you'll say one word and it'll take a completely different word that means something else. It's crazy. So, any other questions? I keep talking and talking.
Where is Bridgeton, actually?
Bridgeton is, you know where Portland is.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
So
it's
it's
fine.
a little bit northwest of Portland, about an hour. So Bridgeton, Sebago, Naples, Casco, Freiburg, on the way to Conway.
It's a sweet town.
It is.
I went through when they were doing the owl book. Do you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
yes.
You go through the woods and they
Yeah,
have
yep, Pondicherry Park,
illustrations from
yep.
the, oh, that was great.
Yeah, Bridgeton is such a sweet, I love Bridgeton. Sandy actually lived in Bridgeton at one point. See? Yeah, it's a small world. You were gonna ask something, Sandy?
I was just curious, and I don't know if there's any way to, how to really tell this, but what's the response you've gotten? You've written a variety of different books,
Yeah.
from historical fiction to the guest book to your children's books. What have you had the most success with, or what do you feel like your readers have enjoyed more? Have you gotten the most response with?
I've had a lot of response with the Bridgeton history books because this is Bridgeton's 250th anniversary of the founding. So it's been a big year for Bridgeton history. So there've been a lot of people, plus we're now offering the book in the gift store at the Rufus Porter Museum, which has been great. So there's been a lot of comments about, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's why Stevensbrook was named Stevensbrook. So I've gotten a lot of comments about that. I still have people coming up to me on the street and asking me how Pearlie's doing, my church mouse. It was funny, we were doing fundraising and he was such a big part of it. I had a couple of people actually made out checks to Pearlie Church Mouse. You know, he doesn't actually have a bank account. So anyway, but it all worked out. But people who know me know the Pondicherry series, and then they find out, oh, there was also this one. And so I get people coming up to me going, I just sobbed my way through the guest book, thank you. And then, I don't know, I think this for me is a really personal book. One of my friends said that she knew which character in the book was me, which is, we don't necessarily put ourselves into the book, but there is some aspect of a writer in their characters. Anyway, she was like, I know which character is you. I said, oh. And I know which one she thought I was. It wasn't the one. But anyway, this book to me is very personal because the people that are in it are people that I feel like I know. Like I know women that have dealt with this, and I know men who have dealt with that. So for me, this is a very personal one, but it's that message of hope. It's that message of healing that's really important to me. So I really, when I finished this, I said, you know what? If I never wrote another book, I'm good with this one. I'm good to end it on that. And then I wrote, another one. And
So does that mean that you are proudest of that one?
I think for me, this series right here, this is my legacy for my town. And I know that, and we opened a time capsule from 50 years ago, and then we did a new time capsule, and I put this series of books in there because I said, who knows, what medium they're going to be using to read things at that point in time. And I said, but this is, for me, this is like, it mattered that these people went through these things and that they accomplished these things, and this is why our town is shaped the way that it is, and it's because of everybody who came before us that we have the sweet little town that we have now, and that we have so much there. So for me, this was like my legacy. This is from my town, and they're also good stories because the people are fascinating.
But wasn't it, I understand that because you're into history so much, but wasn't it more inspirational maybe, or to write fiction? Totally.
This was fun for me.
That's fun.
I mean, this was like, this is a huge amount of work because of the research.
Right.
And this was just like, oh, I guess I'm gonna write a book in 84 days, okay.
Right.
So this for me, and when I was thinking about writing books other than historical fiction, I didn't want to write, like I have some friends who write like romantic comedies, and they're fun, they're fun, but I just didn't want to spend a lot of time writing a book that didn't have some sort of message that was helpful to people. Like I wanted people to get to the end of it and be like, I'm really glad I read that. That helped me in some way, and yeah, I agreed with that, or I didn't agree with that. And that for me has a lot of reward, because that's in a way, it's a gift obviously to me, because now I need to sit down and read the book about how to come back after, horrible things and have a good life. I'm doing okay. But for me, it's being able to kind of, in this case, it was sort of that little touch on the back of, I get it. And that's what people have come back to me and said, that, I really felt like you understood that situation that I went through that was sort of in your book, even though it made me cry. And people just feel like that somebody else gets it, that, there's difficulty in life. It isn't all peaches and cream. And we have this expectation that, oh, we're gonna live happily ever after when we get married, or we're gonna have children, it's gonna be wonderful, we're never gonna have any problems. And then they get surprised along the way. So I think for me, if I'm gonna write more like that, which apparently I am, there's gotta be some depth to it, I guess is where I'm going with that.
It's great, your mom loved that one too.
Yeah,
But,
that was, to me, that was a huge gift.
Yes.
And when she said that Dominique was her favorite character, I was like, I might kind of be like Dominique in some ways. So anyway, it was a lot of fun for me. So hopefully Naughty Nana will be the next one, and the Mostly True Adventures of Salad Girl. And then who knows what's going to happen with, what was her name? Escaped Ornamental. Tiffany, or Crystal, or I don't know. She'll have some sort of high society woman named Muffy.
So I take it you don't have any timelines particularly, you have an order that you have in mind that you're not thinking of
I
any-
try to have an order, try to have a schedule. I mean, then there was the guest book.
Are you a particularly morning writer or night? Or
Mostly I need to make space, and so that I can just kind of like be in my little bubble and write. What I find is when I'm being an accountant or a museum director and I got all this stuff going on, I don't write. So I have to kind of make that space and say, don't come in here. Do not come in this room. Because otherwise I'm constantly dealing with, cat throws up a hairball, or, the dryer stops working, all those day-to-day living kind of things. I really admire writers that could, like Elizabeth Coatsworth, one of my favorite Maine writers. She used to write in the kitchen with all the kids running around and, the stuff and the supper. And her work shows it, because she writes all these little homely tales of, they're wonderful. But I would not be writing in that situation. I'd be like, can you people leave me alone? So anyway, that's my story. I should have a big finish, right? And then,
Thank you